Welcome to These Lads Are Mental. My name is Gary.
And I'm Neil, and our podcast is a lighthearted approach to normalise mental health. Before we start today's show, please listen to our disclaimer. This show is just a group of opinions and is not to be treated as medical advice. If you are struggling with mental health, please speak to your physician or reach out to a service such as Lifeline. Thank you. These Lads Are Mental recognises the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the custodians and traditional owners of Sydney. We pay respect to their ancestors and elders, past and present, and value their continuing connection to lands, living culture, and integral contribution to the bright and inclusive future of this beautiful city that we call home.
Okay, so we're just going to crack on where we left off, eh?
The boys are back in town.
Podcast karaoke. So we finished off the last topic, I believe, was talking about the come back to we're still talking about young men not open about their feelings, etc. So moving on straight into the next question, I think just best place just to get stuck straight in.
Hello everybody, welcome back.
Welcome back. Well, hopefully it's just a continuation from other episodes if you haven't fell asleep.
Welcome back to the toilet or wherever you may be for the last few minutes on company time. Don't forget that.
I'm having a nightmare. Here's a motorbike right outside my apartment. It's just going tonto.
Tonto.
Right, so sorry about that. Something cut my throat.
You're right there.
Right, let's make my throat just went at the worst possible time. So let's crack on with the next question. So the question we got was, we have touched a little bit on this already, but being concerned about the lack of support for people with mental health battles and discussing ways to improve mental health across the board. And again, this person has also mentioned once again about young people with their teens and their peers having mental health.
Yeah.
It's got a bit of a holistic question. It's just like they've asked coping strategies around a busy office. Maybe you can relate to that more because you've worked more in that environment. Support for mental health, which we've touched on, and we can go in a little bit more detail. And then we'll go into that big question at the end. If you can see that in the last column, we can go into that after we discuss everything else, mate. So do you want to kick off with just maybe talk about coping strategies around a busy office? Because you've got if I remember, you told a little story about how was it giving a presentation or something like that in a busy office? Is that right? You said.
Well, yeah, I was going to say let's start with the bad news. The bad news is, like, in terms of support, it's just not there. You know, no matter what country it is, and whether you're in the UK there, us here in Australia, Western cultures, you think, yeah, we're at the forefront of things, and you know, in some areas, in some ways, we are, and the awareness is getting there and all that. People are starting to talk about it more, which is good. It's heading in the right direction, but still nowhere near what it needs to be. Mainly because that pathway, as Gary and I already alluded to, like, that's not ingrained in our DNA, what we need to do if something's wrong with us. So that in itself just tells you there's not enough being done in terms of that support. And also government funding. Like, we interviewed the guy, Nick, the CEO of Batyr, and only up until I think last year, after our episode, not claiming that we made this happen or anything like that, but they finally got government funding. So, you know, there's a charity that's trying to support mental health and they have to self-fund themselves. So it's like, you know, here's companies trying to actually make a difference and they can't even get government funding. So it is a bit of a challenge for every country. And then you take, there's some other different cultural backgrounds where mental health is even way, way further back in terms of the stigma. So yeah, with the support thing, that's probably the biggest gap that we find with this. Hence why we're doing this podcast, right? If there was enough support there, there would be no need for a podcast such as ours, but c'est la vie, and this is what we're trying to do. Yeah, look, in terms of like a busy office, like my background was in corporate, you know, and I worked in advertising, marketing, PR, all that kind of stuff. Unbelievably toxic as you could possibly imagine. Maybe not as much as the Mad Men days, but wasn't far off it. You know, people doing drugs on staff nights in the office, alcohol at the desk, you know, affairs in the office, you know, all this kind of stuff. And then I was rocked pretty bad by a bullying thing about 5 years ago, and I didn't realize at the time, but I was bullied as a kid, and this triggered all this other stuff from when I was back about 7 years of age. Now, I didn't know that was happening to me at the time. But it was happening right in front of my eyes, and it was the first time my character was kind of tested by this kind of bully in the office. And it really kind of rocked me, because, you know, when someone challenges your character, going like, you know, that can have a big impact on you. And we had a global company, so then my boss in the US was getting involved, and I was like, hang on a second here, like, what's going on here? I'm just trying to do my best. And he didn't like that I was just basically questioning some things that he was doing, and got his back up about it. And then he went for me. And as I said, that had never happened to me before, because everywhere I'd gone, I'd always done well, got promoted, you know, career-wise and stuff like that. So those things will happen, right? You probably go through life, like, if you go through life without any of those things happening, I think fair play, you're lucky. I was probably lucky up into that point. But one thing I did, you know, I realized at the end of all that was, if you don't resolve traumas from your past, it can come up and bite you at any point, you know, in the future. So that's why getting ahead of this and going and being proactive about your mental health is only going to last you in the long run. It's going to be hard for a few years, and as you unpack everything and find out about what it is about you that you need to work on. But, you know, I wouldn't change all that for the world, even though it rocked me to my core and I started getting panic attacks and all this kind of stuff. After all that, as a, you know, 33-year-old man, like, which I was kind of going, what's going on? So yeah, look, offices can be a tricky place. Bullying, things like that happen a lot. In terms of strategies, I think, you know, having open channels where you can communicate your fears, your issues and things like that is definitely good. Having security and knowing that it's a place where you can be vulnerable, especially as managers, if anyone is a manager there or a leader, to foster that environment that your team can come to you with their concerns, be it good or bad, I think is a very important thing to do. It's not always easy when you have hierarchies, because in my case, that guy that was the bully was the top dog, you know, he was the most senior person in the office. And we had quite a flat matrix, you know, there was no CEO locally, but he was the most senior director that we had. So who do you go and tell, you know? Do you go and tell someone in the American office? They don't know. And it was only really by luck that he just chanced his arm too many times that he finally got caught out, and then he was fired. But that is the challenge, you know, how do you, you know, approach things like that, particularly with people of senior positions. And one of the good things about the Me Too campaign and things like that, it has brought more awareness and channels for people to discuss their problems. So I think fostering that community is definitely good. When you have a business, as Gary and I know, it's actually quite challenging to shut off, you know. When I think back to my 9-to-5 days, you know, sometimes, you know, I was a bit of a workaholic anyway, but when you leave, at least you can leave, and you can kind of leave most of your troubles at home. When you're a business owner, that's very different, because you carry it into weekends, into nights and things like that. But yeah, I think from a work perspective, just having that clear delineation between when you're in work mode and when you're not. So don't look at emails past a certain time at night, you know, try not to look at your phone the minute you wake up in bed, because then you get an email about some report you need to do, and then that sets you off in a really wrong way. And I think it's the same kind of approach that we were talking about social media and going to bed at night. You need to create those barriers with work, because if you don't, eventually it's going to catch up with you, you know, and that's going to lead to you being more stressed, more tired, worried all the time. You're going to get, you know, bitey with your partner. They're not going to know what's wrong with you, and it just can snowball from there. So I think having good boundaries is probably my big advice to that.
What I took for that, mate, is you're a grass. Can't if you grassed on people.
No, that was part of the thing. I couldn't.
I'm a joke, mate.
No, but I couldn't grass, because I was like, what do I do here? You know, if I tell my top dogs, like in America, and then they come over, he's going to know I ratted them out. But I'm on the
of course, I get it. I'm only
in America. It's like telling, you know, I'm the mafia boss, and then like you've got to go like and work with the same bloke, you know. And it was the ripple effect. He was a bit of a womanizer as well, like, and he was having an affair in the office amongst multiple things, and he used to corner people in the toilet and go, "Where's that report you're supposed to get me?" As someone was going for like number one, like
flash out, mate.
over the top of the toilet. Oi, you've been in here too long. Well, that was one of the things he did actually. Which I'm sorry, I digress here a little bit, but he put a fake poo on the floor in the toilet one day as a joke and sprayed it with water, and then he came out going, "Who's after doing all this?" And it became a thing.
Was that for banter, or was that just to try and?
No, that was for banter. Yeah. But the whole office for a day, he let it sit. He literally, like, and metaphorically, let it sit for a day, and everyone was going around, "Who was the phantom shitter in the office?" Yeah, like. But I'm like, this guy was 43 years of age with 3 kids.
It sounds like a good crack to be fair to him.
He's a fucker. No, but that was that was the other thing. It was a bit of the Pied Piper stuff. Like when I went in there, he was extremely charismatic. Like he was from London, suave, had all the look and all that, and he could charm the pants off anyone, like myself included. I fell for his thing, but then it was just when when you're in work, if you've got anything about you, like if someone asks for your opinion, you go, "Oh, I don't really agree with that because of why." You're just doing your job, right? But someone might take offense to that, which he did. He thought I was kind of questioning his authority. And then it all started to unravel. And it wasn't just me. He was going for all kinds of everybody. Anyone that came, shot any fires across him. And that, unfortunately, is the ugly side of corporate life. But yeah, I mean...
I think while working in a busy office, I mean, obviously you're discussing more the type of, if you have got pressures from maybe another staff member or whatever. Another aspect of a busy office might be if you just need individual space, mental space, and it's hectic. Do you know what I mean? You're in an environment where you can't shut off the noise. I mean, I've not worked really in a corporate office where, I mean, is headphones normal? Can you just go to a separate space? But I know a lot of them are in cubicles or in sort of open workspaces where the noise can't be avoided sometimes, or something you can't stop someone coming up and asking you a question. That could often be probably even more challenging, especially if you've got stuff, say you've had a bad morning or you've got some bad news or going through some shit and I need to go to work, I'm trying to get my work done, take my mind off it, and then somebody keeps coming up and asking you for things, and there's no barrier you can put up to without saying fuck off or showing that you can't stay private and to the other staff members that you're going through something, you want your own space. That's hard to manage because there is boundaries that you put. That's when maybe going to somebody like you said, a senior, and saying, "Look, this is my situation at the moment." Day to day would be hard because every day would be a door getting chap saying, "Oh, it's a shite morning. Any chance of having a wee bit of private time?" That's a nightmare. So it's a hard one to manage, really.
Well, there's a few things. What we used to do, which worked quite well, is we used to have these little red flags. So you could pin a little red flag to your desk thing, and that was like, "Don't disturb me,"
Don't disturb me. Oh yeah, okay, yeah.
Or you can put it in your I don't know what you guys use there, but we had like Gmail, so you had like your G chat, which would ping all the time, but you could turn that offline. So little things like that you can do. Another tip is if you do need to vent, and venting actually is an important part of this, right? There's no point sitting there in your own like pool kind of going, "This is shy," or "That person doing that." What I found useful is if the company, it seems like you guys have quite a bit of staff, is like you might know, dare I say, Karen from accounts, or or someone like that you meet, in the kitchen once a day for tea. Like they're good people to have those.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, because especially if they're non-related to your department, let's say you're marketing and they're in accounts, they don't it doesn't really matter if you have a vent about someone over that team, and that actually is quite useful. And I got some really good throwaway advice from people like that, especially if they're in a senior position. Even people like CFOs are usually quite good because they're, quite, I was going to say trustworthy, but you know what I mean? They're quite, they're built on strong values, let's say, in terms of their rules and stuff like that. Like, people like that, you can actually befriend and get some, almost like a kind of an in-office mentor, and people will lend their advice. They will do it, but that certainly has helped me, I think, in the past, being very upfront about you're in a busy zone for the next 2 hours, I can't be disturbed. And then, venting to someone in a different department can help,
Well, the end of this question, it's quite a big question, and on these, we're going to break this episode into another 2 parts, so there'll be 4 parts in total, but we've still got 1, 2, 3, probably 4 more topics to get through. But this question, we spoke about it off camera, was a big one, so we just need to try our best to keep it short answer wise. So I'm going to give it to you, Sully. And
this one obviously is
less than a minute. Try and give me an answer. I'm going to ask you, and you can ask me. Give me your answer. Less than a minute, all right?
Yeah, the answer is like if you had unlimited resources, like what would you do to help mental health? It's kind of like the $1 million question. However, if you were to simplify it, and thinking of you guys with the NHS, right? With the NHS, you can walk in off the street, because I even did this before. I got pissed in Nottingham many, many years ago, split my head open, and then I walked into an NHS. They saw me, stitched me up and sent me off like that. Wasn't built for it. Now that is amazing, right? Obviously Ireland and England had like a close relationship in terms of reciprocal health. But I think you should be able to go in just straight off the street, no matter where you are. Like, and in Australia, we have this thing called bulk billing, which is amazing. We have Medicare over here. So you get a card if you're a citizen and you have PR, and you can go into a bulk billing thing where you don't even get charged for a GP visit. You know, I think that should be set up in a way that's open and approachable for people going, if you're in a moment of, because that's like, look, please don't take anything I say here as medical advice right now. But my theory about people, let's say, particularly when they take their own life, is yes, sometimes it can be premeditated. But I had a friend who lost his life, and he spent a weekend with us at a music festival and had the best time ever. You know, won't lie, we got on it, you know, as you imagine. We got home, I dropped my bags off, and an hour later I got a phone call saying he took his life. Now, anyone that goes on 2-3 day benders will know you're in the worst place you possibly can be for at least 48 hours, right? Now, my belief is, and we didn't know he was struggling at all. He never said anything to anybody, not even his family. And I learned afterwards that he actually had a brother with an intellectual disability that didn't live at home, but he never shared that either. So he just didn't want to share parts about him. And unfortunately, my theory on him is that he probably got home, was in the worst place ever, and just went, fuck it, that's it. And he was gone, and we never gone back. So, whereas if you flip that on the other side and think, if he knew there was support there that he could get to, even independent support, like, I think that could be the answer, you know. Pathways are important, and I think they will lend into it. But if you really drum it down to, people need to be comfortable to be able to walk in off the street into a mainstream GP and get immediate support. And it's just about getting them through that day. Because anyone would tell you, even if you're depressed or things like that, and you can have the shittest day ever, the next day, you're never the same, whether it's better or worse. You're never the same on any one day, right? And it's that thing, if you can just get through that day, you know, when you're at your worst, the next day hopefully can be better, you know? So that's my kind of 2 cents. I think if we can create an NHS...
That's unlimited, just to caveat, that is unlimited resources. So I know people might be thinking, yeah, but that's not practical, because then people can walk off the street with like any sort of thing, blah, blah. The question was having unlimited resources. So you've got unlimited people to visit the people, unlimited doctors, unlimited professionals. That was the question.
So there is a cost to that, because even the bulk billing costs the government money, right? So
it's unlimited resources. That's what I'm saying. It's unlimited resource. That was the question. So that would be your answer to that question. For me, it would be more. That'd be a great solution, mate. I agree with you. That's support. Another one I would look at is schools, youth. I would go back to the comment that you made on part 1 or part 2 regarding the IKEA thing. I would spend more resources, more energy, having more professionals, ensuring that the kids who are sponges are the ones who are setting an example. That is the next generation. That they're the ones who, if there's anything that adults will change for, they'll change for their children, or the better for their children. Yeah. So if they are seeing their children behaving a certain way, or the children's calling the parents out for behaving a certain way or acting a certain way or whatever it might be, like, oh mum, you look sad, talk to me. Like, I can guarantee if a parent can say that to a parent often enough, they would eventually start to open up, or at least if they don't open up to them, realise I need to go and take action here, because they're seeing me in this state. I don't want them to see me in this state. So I think having education or practical resources, like we do with all children's education, make it fun, make it interactive, make it practical, make it gamified. I'm not a person to tell you how to do that, of course not, but there's a lot of smart people out there who are experts in this area. That's where I'd put my 2 cents. Yeah,
look, if we were to go real big and hairy about changing, I mean, the education system as a whole, and it's not just about mental health, right? You think about all the things that we need in our life, like budgeting, financing, you know, how to cook, even some form of exercise, things like there's loads of things that necessarily don't get done at an education level. Imagine having that life skill of being able to cope with your emotions. Like psychology, I think everybody should do some form of psychology whenever you need it. I'm not saying all the time, every time, but psychology benefits you in so many different ways. And when you need it, it's great to tap into it. And sometimes your mental health can be circumstantial. You know, if you might lose somebody and you might need help in that moment, and it could be a 6-week thing, and that's all you need, and that's fine. Other times you have to do it every single week for a couple of years to get through things. But yeah, as Gary said, like the youth is probably a good way to tap into it, because as the Batir guy said, 75% of mental health conditions manifest before you turn 18. So if you're not addressing them before you turn 18, it's a lot harder to address an issue that you've got when you're a 35-year-old man, you know, or woman, or a 50-year-old woman or a 50-year-old man, than it is when you're a 12-year-old, you know, when you're learning as you're going. So yeah, I think that'd be good. But I think those, yeah, if that was brought in where you had almost like a counselor in a school, maybe, whether there was a class on counselling or somewhere where people could go. Because I remember as a kid as well, like when I was getting bullied in primary school, I'd know where to go, like, and my mum had to step in and ring all the other parents and all that. And you know what I mean? It's just, yeah, it all got a bit like, you know, and when I started doing work later in life, only a few years ago, the coach I was working with made me go back and ring all those bullies and write letters to them, like, to release that trauma. So that's like, if it's not, you know, if you don't look at it in the moment, you're carrying that shit around with you. I was for nearly 30 years. Like, what's that doing to you at a DNA level, at a health level, at a relationship level, you know, all these kind of things. And if you don't, like, if people that aren't attuned, accustomed to getting help and psychology and all those kind of things, you're just going to carry that around forever. And then that can lead into things like alcoholism or cheating or drugs or whatever, because you're trying to escape from whatever that thing is you've got, you know. So it certainly has helped me, I will say, personally.
Okay, brilliant. Well, the next, we've got probably 2 or 3 more topics. There is a few more other questions, but a lot of them have already been sort of spoken about. There's one about bullying, which Neil's just went into a bit of detail about. There's one about self-confidence, which we spoke about in part 1. There's a couple of good ones here, though. So the next one of them was really interesting, and it was a question I found interesting. I read it. So the question says, or the worry was, I often find myself worried about how slow time seems to be going in the moment. But then when they look back at the time, they realise how quickly things have actually happened for themselves, and it makes them worry about how much they're missing out in the moment and the effect that's having on them mentally. Now, that's a cool question, because I understand where you're coming from. Really, say you're at work and it's dragging in, or you're at an event, fun thing, not fun thing, and it feels like it's dragging in, you don't want to be there, or even you do want to be there, feel like it's slow, but you're not really making the most of it, you're not being present. And then before you know it, you're like, how is it November already? I've not really done anything. So how do you enjoy being in the moment? It's a big question. It's like the whole one, what makes you happy, which again, someone's asked as well. Being present, is there anything, Solly, that you would maybe, and this is someone's worry. Again, this is just, is there anything you've experienced the same? Have you experienced the same thing in your own?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think, especially when you're a business owner as well, you plow on. You every day you get caught up in it, and you just go through it, and you go to the next day. I need to get that. I need to make that sale. I need to get more money. And then all of a sudden, like, I'm 7 years into the business, and often you don't take a stop to go, wow, geez, you're actually doing pretty good here, mate, or whatever it is. And what was coming out of that thought was accepting the wins. We're often quite bad at accepting the wins. Like, I take the losses to heart, but I think generally we don't accept the wins well. So what do you do there? Well, you know, I do think gratitude, writing things down, spending the moment to reflect. We spoke about the reviewing your day. I thought that was a brilliant exercise for me, because that just takes 2 minutes before you go to bed. Just sit down in the kitchen for a minute with a piece of paper and a pen, review your day and go, Jesus, I got through a lot today. That will sink into your consciousness, which I think is a very good practice to kind of to do. And the other thing I was thinking of, Gary, was the episode that we did with Andrew Marsh, the meditation practitioner, and I've trained in Vedic meditation, but he spoke about this thing called living in the now. And he tried to explain.
That was a mad conversation.
It was like an episode of Inception. He was like, you know, okay, we're in the now as we're speaking, but where were we 10 seconds ago, Gary? You know, and Gary goes, the past. And he goes, no, we were in the now 10 seconds ago. So you're in the
I
now,
mean, that was,
in the now, and it was like a vortex.
that blew my mind, that.
But I think what I've heard before in this area is like, if you struggle with anxiety and things like that, that's worrying about the future. If you've got depression, it's usually worrying about the past, the traumas.
Yeah.
Living in the now, and I've heard this lots of different practices and teachers from all different cultures. This isn't just a meditation thing, but if you live in the now and focus on the present moment that you're in right now, you can't focus about anything else. That's in essence what meditation is, right? You're focusing on something that's right now. If you focus and concentrate on that where you're in now, all those other things don't come in, or if they do come in, you can kind of bat them off. So I think trying to live in the now, I actually had it written up on my fridge for ages going, just focus on the now, focus on whatever it is you're doing right now. Just think about that and just keep coming back to that. And you're not going to be able to stay there forever because something's going to pop with your head. Someone's going to send you a text message. You'll get triggered by something. That's always going to be there. But if it does happen, just try and realign. Okay, right now, though, I need to just, do the washing. And that's just what I'm going to focus on now. Just focus on that, get through that, move on to the next thing. It seems so simple, but it has definitely helped me, I will say.
Yeah, there's only two. I'll just add not anything else to what you said because you've wrapped it up nicely. Just two resources. Not resources. One would be Eckhart Tolle, the book Power of Now. It's a pretty popular book. A lot of people.
A lot of people reference that in many episodes that we had. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good book. If you're not someone who reads, then fair enough. But that's a good resource if you're someone who does read, or an audio book, or even if you just Google some stuff and read some maybe synopsis about it. But that's a resource like we'll send in there. The second thing is, I don't know if you're a football fan, but a good quote, Jurgen Klopp always talks about, who's a Liverpool manager. He always talks about whatever you're doing, you do it 100%. So that means when these players turn up to training, obviously, they have to be there 100%. They're not thinking about their family. They're not thinking about their holidays. They're thinking about training 100%. However, the same applies when they go home. When they go home, they think about that one thing 100%. They don't think about football. They don't think about their media expectations or whatever else. He doesn't want to hear from them. That's family time. And then the same again when they won the Champions League and they went on the piss. He said the exact same thing. And remember what I said? We do things 100%. So they went absolutely tonto. They had a massive party, and he's like, "This is what they're doing because we've decided at this point, be present at what you're doing at this moment and do it 100%." Yeah. So that's a really simple thing. I try and keep that in my own life, which is again, it's hard. This is just words, but it is hard to do practically. But it's something I just kind of go, right, I'm sitting with my wife doing whatever I'm doing. Just be here now because this moment's going to pass.
It goes back to what we're saying, right? We're saying a lot of things here, right? It's not about you guys learning all this, but this is the beauty of the awareness piece, right? Because this is all going to sink into the back of your mind somewhere, and it might not come back up again for 6 months or whatever, or it might come back up once and you go, oh yeah, and then you do it and then you forget about it. But that's okay. You've got it in your locker now, and it will come back up. You'll be surprised how much this will come back in your everyday life. And the other analogy around all this is the eating the burger analogy. So I'm sure everyone will relate to this, where you're like hungover or you do something, you're like, fuck, I'm just going to get a burger. I had a shit day. You eat the burger, and then about 2 bites into the burger, you start feeling guilty because you're eating the burger. I shouldn't be eating this. I haven't trained for a few days. Now that's doing even more damage to you by the fact that you're actually guilting yourself about eating the burger. If you want to have a burger, fucking eat the burger. And when you eat the burger in that moment, enjoy every fucking morsel of it. And if afterwards you're like, right, I need to do a training class tomorrow about it, so be it, that's fine. But when you're in the moment of eating that burger, don't focus on what it's doing to you. Just focus on the fact the burger is good yourself,
Yep, good point, mate. Cool, so try and move on to the next topic. There's a couple more questions.
There was one other thing, Gary, I was going to say. I don't know. No, sorry, my wife just came in there. I asked her to get me a coffee, but she didn't. She gave me a chocolate, but no coffee. I was like, great. Now the other thing is have you ever heard of the 1% guy? There's a guy with Down syndrome in America. His name is Chris. I can't remember his surname, but I'll get his Instagram profile for the resources. And he's a fucking absolute legend. He came up with this one-liner, which has now made him world famous. He's a triathlete. And he was asked a question about like, why y'all doing this, or what's your goal? And he goes, my goal every day is to be 1% better than I was yesterday. And if you think about that, right, 1% is achievable, right? No matter what you're doing. If you go for a run today and do 5 kilometers and you do it in 10 minutes or whatever, if you run, 1% of that is probably 5 seconds quicker. Imagine if you did that consistently every day, you'd be an elite athlete, like, you know what I mean?
I mean, same with the gym. So a lot of athletes I work with, typical, and you're probably guilty of this yourself. Go to the gym, say you're doing a squat or something like that. You go in, you lift 50 kilos. Like, cool. The next week you go 55. Next week you go 60, and then you start going. You bounce up, like, and those percentages are like that's a 20% increase. It's a 25. I'm like, well, just slow down, right? What will happen is in 12 weeks, if you keep doing that, you're going to hit a fucking brick wall. And you're going to be stuck at 90 kilos for like 6 months. You can't just keep going at that speed. However, let's just take it back a second and just say 1%. So the exact same analogy, over a full year, it's much easier to lift 1% more, 1 kilo extra onto the bar. Say, just add 1 kilo onto the bar for the next year. You'll be lifting 50 kilos more. Imagine that in 2 years, you'll be an elite power lifter by that point.
Yeah.
You wouldn't even notice that weight going on the bar, but you can't do that. Why? Because naturally, as humans, we want to go, I want to add 5 kilos on. You want to do, let's go on a diet. I'm going to stop everything. I'm going to stop eating all the food I enjoy. I'm going to exercise every single fucking day. It's not sustainable. And over that change is too drastic, too soon. And yes, you could do it for 6 weeks. You get as quick changes, brilliant. But most people who go through these 6-week drastic changes, the drastic ones, within 10 weeks, they're almost back to where they were again because it's not sustainable. And I think that's the exact same, that 1%, because by the power of returns, over the course of 1% better versus 1% worse over a year, that gap is huge. If you put it on a chart, the gap would be monumental.
Yeah.
So I think that is such a small thing. And again, going back to what we spoke about in part 1 and part 2, it's not about being 1% better on everything. Pick the one thing, just one thing even. You go, I want to try and for the next 28 days, get 1% better at it. 1% better, which is nothing. The conversation just, am I a little bit better, or do I know a little bit more than I did yesterday? Yes, cool. I'm moving forward. And that's it. That's as simple as it can be. It's a win. That is a win. And it's about longevity there. Yeah. I think that's how you make change, like real change. Real change. So I think moving on to the next question, there's only like 2 topics related that we haven't already covered. And one would be, this is a big topic, a deep topic. So it's my biggest concern and worry that I've been having recently is losing the people closest to you, and sometimes even having thoughts about dying and death. I struggle to comprehend that we're in an empty space after life, and that we'll never have another life again. To make me feel as ease and better about this, I have thoughts that we will reunite with our loved ones when that day comes. The thought of losing someone close to you really makes me worry, as you don't know how long you have left with anyone. Now, that's a massive topic, but I've actually heard a few of my mates mention something, especially if they've got older and they've seen maybe their parents or their uncles or aunties pass away or get sick. And especially for us, because we live far away from family, it hits you a little bit more, and you start to realise shit. Because when you're younger, you think your parents are invincible, or you just think they'll be around forever and ever. Then you start to come to terms with shit. They might not be around forever. So this is a completely normal thought. And can you relate to that at all, Solly?
Yeah, I think it definitely hits home, especially as an expat, as Gary was saying there, and even not as an expat. Like, we've been living in Sydney, my wife's in Brisbane, and her dad's not the best at the moment. He's got Parkinson's, and we've moved up to Brisbane, and I dragged my heels about that, and she wanted to be close to home, but we've been up there now a couple of months, and he's doing okay, but who knows? He could go at any time. You don't really know that. He could live another 30 years. But, I said to her the other day about all this, I was like, at least now you can have comfort that we've had this time with him. So whatever happens after this is kind of a bonus, So yeah, it is important to if I'm sure everyone has some scenario with their mum, with their sisters or something like that, or uncles, where they have a fight, you have a row and something like that. And it's the whole thing of like, one day when you go to ring your parents, they're just not going to be there anymore. That's something that I always kind of keep in the back of my mind. I lost my granddad when I spent the summer in New York, and he was my best mate. And he died when I was midair on the way home. and my dad picked me up in the airport and told me he was gone. And I was like devastated, you know. I was literally, and he lived in the same estate as me, so I was one day away from probably seeing him, you know. But having said that, he went out with a heart attack. He was eating sausages, watching football. So it's like absolute belter, you know. Like you couldn't pick a better way to go. And I think, you know, it does go back to that kind of living in the now. You know, it's just like cherish the moments. Like take a moment to stop and just cherish who you've got in your life, in your family. Tell yourself about it. Regurgitate it in the mirror. You know, Gary, you said before coming over the bridge saying like, I'm grateful for this, you know, like do those moments. Because if you fill up your bank of, there's a phrase around it, like your emotional bank. If you put deposits into your emotional bank, they'll be there for you when you need them, you know. But also when you do lose someone, going back to the grief thing, grief unfortunately is just an element that we're all going to face in some shape or form. Everyone's going to lose someone. And if that does come, don't be afraid to lean into the grief, you know, is what Sally and Imogen said to us. And whether that is, you know, having a few more drinks than you normally would to get you through that moment, it's different for all of us. But it's an important part of life, and you need to let those emotions in, because if you push those emotions away and suppress them, when you actually need to use them, even with grief and sorrow, like that's also not doing you good, suppressing those emotions, you know. So you kind of just got to let them in, unfortunately.